Your brother deserves it, Dad said. They gave him the house, the cash, the company. A month later, Mom texted, mortgage is due. I replied, ask your heir. The words echoed in my mind long after the phone call ended. It had been 2 years since I left. 2 years since I packed my car with nothing but my pride and a few belongings, and drove away from the family I thought I could trust. I was tired, angry, and ready to be done with it all. But here I was, at the mercy of a message from my mother again. I hadn't heard from her in months. Her message was simple. Can we talk? The usual hollow words, no real apology, just a call for help, as if nothing had ever happened. The nerve. I hadn't even read the second message yet. I knew what it would say. They needed something. They always did. I stared at the screen for a moment, feeling the sharp pang of betrayal rise in my chest. The company, the business my grandfather had built with his hands, was slipping through their fingers, and they thought I would come running. But I wasn't the little girl who begged for attention anymore. I had worked for this, earned everything I had on my own, without any of their support. 2 years ago, they handed everything over to Ryan. The house. The company. The cash. As if I had never worked a day in my life. As if I had never spent years holding everything together while Ryan got away with coasting. He was the golden boy. The one who could do no wrong. And it never mattered how much I gave, how much I sacrificed. It wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. Ike. I thought about that night, the night Dad looked me in the eye and told me I didn't deserve what I'd worked so hard for. That Ryan, with his easy path through life, deserved everything more than I ever could. I walked out that night, furious, my hands shaking with a mix of anger and hurt. I left Boston, and I thought I was done. But here I was, reading her message. And I couldn't help but wonder if I really had left everything behind. The room felt cold as I looked out over the city of Chicago, my city now. No memories, no expectations. I wasn't running away, I was rebuilding. I built my own business from nothing, one cold call at a time. But even now, despite everything, I couldn't stop the thoughts from creeping in. I had chosen this path. And yet, the past had a way of catching up with me when I least expected it. One simple text, and I was right back where I started, staring at the ghosts of my family and the lies they had told themselves. They thought they could erase me, that I would just disappear. They had no idea what I was capable of. I closed the message without replying. But the phone buzzed again almost immediately. Another text. This one felt different. I glanced at it and my heart stopped. It wasn't an apology. There was no, I'm sorry, or, I regret what happened. It was just a plea for help. We need you. The message read. Your father won't admit it, but the company is in trouble. I put the phone down slowly, as though the weight of it might crack the screen if I wasn't careful. A flood of emotions washed over me, disbelief, anger, pity, but most of all, something I hadn't felt in a long time, power. For the first time in 2 years, I was being called back. Not as the daughter who was always overlooked, but as someone who could actually do something. I stood up from my desk and looked out the window at the skyline. I was no longer the person who let herself be pushed aside. I wasn't a little girl begging for approval. And I certainly wasn't going to let them destroy the one thing had been built with so much love and sweat. I had a decision to make. Would I walk away again, leave them to drown in their mess? Or would I go back, take control, and rebuild what they had destroyed? I couldn't decide yet. But one thing was clear. The power had shifted. And it was no longer in their hands. I didn't reply to my mother's text. Instead, I stared at the screen, the words swimming in front of me. My mind was a mix of anger, disbelief, and confusion. 2 years had passed since I walked away from Boston, from all of them. 2 years of building something new, my own business, my own life. And now, just when I thought I could have it all behind, the past was knocking again. I tossed my phone onto the table and leaned back in my chair. The city outside my apartment window was cold and distant, much like I felt inside. I hadn't just left Boston. I had left my family, the business, the expectations. The weight of it all had been too much. I needed space, I needed freedom. Chicago had given me that. It had been a clean break, a fresh start, and I wasn't sure I was ready to go back to all the pain and disappointment. Still, the message lingered. We need you. It wasn't the first time I'd gotten a call for help from them, but it was the first time in a long while that it felt different. More desperate, perhaps. It felt like they were finally acknowledging the mess they'd made. And they were reaching out to the one person they thought had turned their back on them. I stood up and walked over to the window. The lights from the city below blurred together, a reminder that life continued, whether or not I chose to stay in the past. But the past was never far behind. The truth was, I hadn't expected to hear from them again. Not like this. I'd moved on. My business was growing. I'd put everything I had into this new life. But now? I couldn't ignore it. The message wasn't just a plea, it was an invitation to return to a life I'd sworn off. They needed me. But they had never made room for me before. They didn't know how to fix what was broken, and I was the only one who had ever cared enough to try. I thought about the years I spent working for the family company. The countless hours I put in, sacrificing my own happiness, my own desires, for the good of something that, in the end, didn't really care about me. Not the way it cared about Ryan. Ryan. The golden child. The one who could do no wrong. The one who, even after screwing up at every turn, was handed everything on a silver platter. The company, the house, the legacy. I had spent so many years trying to prove I was worthy, trying to prove to my father that I was just as capable as Ryan. But it never mattered. He was always the chosen one. The hair and I was the one who kept the wheels turning, unnoticed. But I wasn't going to keep doing that. Not anymore. I had walked away because I'd had enough. I was tired of being the one who always picked up the pieces. Tired of being the one who had to do the hard work while Ryan coasted on his name and title. I deserved more than that. I deserved respect, recognition, and the chance to build something on my own terms. And that's exactly what I had done in Chicago. The phone buzzed again, pulling me from my thoughts. Another message. I picked it up, expecting more of the same. But this time, it was from Barbara, a neighbor from back home. Cheryl, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but things aren't looking good. I know your parents were proud of the business, but it's falling apart. The trucks haven't been in the driveway for weeks. And I heard from a few of the employees that things are really bad. The words hit me harder than I expected. I stood there for a moment, the weight of it all settling over me. The business I had poured my heart into for so many years, the one my grandfather built with his own hands, was crumbling. And no one was doing anything to stop it. My father, once so proud of what he'd built, had let it all slip away. And now, after all this time, after all the hurt, they wanted me to come back. I sat down at my desk, staring at the phone in my hands. The old anger and frustration boiled inside me, but this time it was different. I wasn't just angry. I was determined. I had left, yes, but I had also moved forward. And now, I had a choice. I could go back to the wreckage they had created, or I could walk away for good. I ran my fingers over the edge of my desk. I knew the answer, even if I wasn't ready to admit it yet. There was no more running from this. I was going back. Not as the daughter who was overlooked, not as the one who had been ignored, but as the person who could fix what they had broken. I didn't owe them anything, but I owed it to myself to see it through, and I would do it on my terms. The decision was made. It was time to go back. Time to face the past once and for all. And when I did, they would see me for who I really was. Not just their daughter, but someone who had the power to save them. The silence in my apartment felt heavier now. The city below continued its relentless hum, oblivious to the internal storm I was grappling with. My phone sat on the desk, still buzzing with updates. I hadn't responded to Barbara's message yet, and I wasn't sure if I should. The words she had written were still echoing in my mind. Things aren't looking good. The trucks haven't been in the driveway for weeks. I heard from a few employees that things are really bad. The business was falling apart. It wasn't just a rumor or idle gossip. This was real. And for the first time in a long while, I felt that familiar pang of responsibility gnawing at me. It wasn't just the company that was crumbling. It was everything my grandfather had built, everything that had defined our family for decades. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. The memories flooded back, long days at the job site, late nights poring over blueprints, the smell of sawdust and fresh paint. I had spent so many years doing the work no one else saw, all while Ryan was handed everything with a smile. I thought about all the times I had sacrificed personal happiness for the company, believing that one day my efforts would be noticed. I had been wrong, but I wasn't that person anymore. I had left. I had started over in Chicago, built a new life. My business was growing. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. And now, out of nowhere, my past was coming back with a vengeance. My parents' plea for help felt like an anchor pulling me back into a sea of dysfunction I had fought so hard to escape. The phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother, followed by another from Martin, one of the senior estimators who had worked for my father for years. His words hit me harder than I expected. Cheryl, I left the company today. Ryan fired Dolores and Jim. Said they were too expensive. I thought you should know before things get worse. I felt the tension in my shoulders tighten, the familiar knot of frustration and helplessness forming in my chest. Ryan had always made decisions like this. He didn't care about the people who had worked for the company, the ones who had kept it running when things got tough. He cared about appearances, about making sure he looked good while others picked up the slack. And now, here he was, destroying everything I had spent years building. I stared at the messages, the weight of it all pressing down on me. The company wasn't just struggling, it was on the brink of collapse. And I was the one who had always known how to fix things. I was the one who had kept everything together when my father and brother had been too busy with their own ambitions to care. But I had walked away. I had walked away because I knew my worth. And it wasn't in that place anymore. But now it was clear that I couldn't just leave it to fall apart. The company, the legacy, it meant more than just a business. It was my grandfather's dream, and I was the only one who had ever cared enough to protect it. If I didn't do something, everything would be lost. And despite everything, I still felt responsible. I had built a life for myself here in Chicago, but what had I really built? I had walked away, but the pieces of the past were still with me, like shadows I couldn't outrun. The emails, the messages, the phone calls, they all pointed to one truth. The family business was in crisis, and I was the only one who could help. I walked over to the window again, looking out at the darkening skyline. Chicago had been a refuge, a place where no one knew me as the daughter of the man who ran a failing construction company. I had carved out my own identity, built something of my own. But the past had a way of finding its way back, no matter how far I ran. I had always thought that leaving would free me, that walking away from my family would allow me to finally breathe. But the reality was different. They were still my family, and they were still my responsibility. If I wanted to truly move forward, I needed to face what I had left behind. I couldn't keep running. I grabbed my phone again, hands trembling as I typed a quick response to Martin. Thanks for letting me know. I'll handle it. It wasn't much, but it was a step toward taking back control. As I set the phone down, I felt a new resolve settling in. I had built my life here, and I wasn't going to throw it all away. But I also wasn't going to stand by and watch the family legacy crumble. If I was going back, it wouldn't be as the neglected daughter. It would be as the one who could fix it. The decision was made. There was no turning back now. I would go to Boston, face my past, and take control of the company. And when I did, they would see me for who I really was, not just their daughter, but someone who had the power to save them all. The flight to Boston felt longer than it should have. I sat with my arms folded, staring out the window at the endless stretch of clouds beneath me, feeling the weight of everything that had brought me here. My mind kept racing back to the same place, the same night, 2 years ago. The night I walked away. The night I was told, in no uncertain terms, that I wasn't worthy of the company, of the house, of anything. That Ryan deserved it all. I had thought walking away would be enough. That if I just put enough distance between myself and my family, the ache of rejection would fade. But now, as the city of Boston loomed closer, I realized that wasn't the case. The ache was still there, buried deep. And it wasn't going away until I faced it. I wasn't coming back as the daughter they'd always ignored, the one who had been nothing more than a footnote in the family business. I was coming back to reclaim my place, not just as a daughter, but as someone who had the power to save them all. The plane touched down, and I could feel the tension in my body tighten. This was it, no more running. I was here to confront everything I had avoided for so long. As I walked through the terminal, I could already feel the old ghosts pulling at me. The smell of the city, the cold air that hit me as I stepped outside, it all brought back memories, both good and bad. I rented a car and made the drive to the suburbs. The houses grew larger as I drove, the streets more familiar. But nothing was the same. Not anymore. When I pulled up to the house, I felt a chill run through me. The once proud home my father had built with his own hands, my grandfather's legacy, looked abandoned. The lawn, which my father used to treat like a public monument, was now overgrown. The shutters were chipped, the driveway cracked. And there, in front of the house, was the glaring absence of the family company's trucks. It hit me then, harder than I expected, that nothing about this place felt like home anymore. It was a hollow shell of what it used to be. I walked up to the front door, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no one to greet me, no one to usher me in with the comfort of familiarity. I knocked once, and when no one answered, I turned the handle and stepped inside. The house was quiet, too quiet. I walked through the entryway, my footsteps echoing in the hollow space. It felt like the house had been waiting for me to return, but in a way that felt far more like a final reckoning than a warm welcome. The living room was a disaster. Stacks of paperwork covered the coffee table, mortgages, loans, contractor disputes, and a pile of overdue bills. My father was pacing behind my mother, who was sitting on the couch, her hands clasped tightly together. And then there was Ryan, lounging in an armchair, his face buried in his phone. "Cheryl," my mother said, standing up quickly. "We didn't expect you so soon." Oh. I could hear the tension in her voice, the nerves that had always been there, even when things were supposed to be calm. She had never been able to hide her fear from me. Not when I was a child, and certainly not now. "Where's Dad?" I asked, my voice steady even though my insides were anything but. He's right here," my mother said, her voice wavering as she looked over at my father. Dad stopped pacing and finally turned toward me. His face was pale, his shoulders slumped in a way I had never seen before. The man who had once been a towering figure of authority and pride now looked smaller, defeated. And there, in the corner of the room, was Ryan, who hadn't even looked up from his phone. "Cheryl," Dad said, his voice barely audible. We're glad you're here. Glad? The word felt hollow, empty, coming from him. My eyes moved from my father to Ryan, then to my mother, who was already looking away, clearly uncomfortable. I stepped into the room fully, taking in the mess around me. What happened? I asked. What happened to everything? My father took a deep breath, as though trying to find the right words. We're in trouble. The company is, well, it's falling apart. We've been struggling for a while now, but we didn't want you to know. We didn't want to pull you back into this. I looked at him, my heart pounding. Our company was in jeopardy, and they had let it go this far without saying a word to me. Without asking for help. Without even acknowledging the work I had put in. Pull me back into what? I asked, my voice colder than I intended. You didn't need me then. You didn't need me when I was the one holding everything together. Now that everything's falling apart, suddenly you want me back. I turned away, unable to look at them. The anger, the betrayal, it all came rushing back. I had spent so many years trying to prove I was worthy of something that had never been mine to begin with. And now, after everything, they thought they could just bring me back in when it was convenient for them. I need you, Cheryl, my father said quietly. I need you to help fix this. We're out of options. We thought if you came back, if you could help us, we might still have a chance. I turned back toward them, my heart racing. The weight of the moment settled heavily in my chest. This wasn't just about saving the business. It was about everything I had given up, everything I had sacrificed for their expectations. It was about finally taking control of my own life, of my own future. I'm not coming back as a consultant, I said. I'm not here to save you while Ryan takes credit for everything again. If you want my help, it comes with terms. Clear terms. Ryan finally looked up from his phone, his expression unreadable. What terms? He asked. His voice dripping with disinterest. I walked over to the coffee table, picking up a pile of documents. You'll see, I said, my voice steady but firm. This time, I'll be in charge. The air in the room was thick with tension. I could feel the weight of my father's gaze, the quiet desperation in his eyes. He had never asked for my help before, not like this. It was a humbling moment, but it wasn't enough to erase the years of neglect, the years I had spent trying to prove myself in a family that never seemed to care. Ryan's eyes narrowed as I laid out my terms. You're serious? He asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. You think you can just walk in here and take over? I stood my ground, refusing to let his condescending tone shake me. I'm not here to play games, Ryan. The company is on the edge of collapsing, and I'm the only one who knows how to save it. But it won't happen unless things change. My father, who had been pacing nervously in the background, finally spoke up. What exactly are you asking for, Cheryl? He said, his voice quieter now, less authoritative than I remembered. We're not in a position to just give you everything you want. I took a breath, steadying myself. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. I want majority ownership, I said firmly. I want full control of the company's operations, financial, strategic, all of it. I'll restructure everything, but only on my terms. I need complete transparency. No more lies. No more cover-ups. Ryan scoffed. And what? You think you can just kick me out of the company I'm supposed to lead? His jaw clenched as he stood up, a flicker of anger flashing in his eyes. I faced him, unflinching. You never led the company, Ryan. You just sat in your office while everyone else did the work. Now it's time for you to step down. No more authority over finances, no more control over operations. You'll focus on client relations, nothing else. And if you don't like it, that's too bad. The company won't survive unless I'm in charge. Ryan opened his mouth to argue, but I held up my hand, silencing him. And one more thing, I added, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. You'll have no say in any of the decisions I make. You're out of the way, and you'll stay out of the way. Ryan's face reddened, but he didn't say anything for a long moment. He just stared at me, eyes burning with a mix of resentment and disbelief. He knew he had no choice but to accept what I was offering, even if it made him furious. My father, on the other hand, looked more defeated than ever. He sighed heavily, as though the weight of the world was pressing down on him. Cheryl, he said softly, almost pleading, this isn't fair. You left. You gave up. And now you're asking for everything. I felt a sharp pang of anger at his words. I didn't give up, Dad. I was pushed out. I wasn't the one who left. You and Ryan made that decision for me. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with years of unspoken pain. My mother sat quietly, her hands still clasped together, as if she were trying to hold herself together. She hadn't said a word since I arrived, and I could feel the guilt and regret radiating off her in waves. But it was too late for apologies now. They had all had their chance to make things right, and they had chosen not to. Ryan still hadn't moved. This is insane, he muttered under his breath, pacing back and forth. You think you can just come in here and take over everything? Yeah, I said, my voice calm but resolute. I do. A long silence filled the room. I could feel the weight of my father's disappointment, the sting of his betrayal, but it didn't sway me. This wasn't about him or Ryan anymore. This was about saving the company. This was about proving to myself that I could do something they had never believed I could do. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, my father sat down at the table, his shoulders sagging with the weight of the decision ahead. If we say no, he whispered, then, you walk away again. I nodded. Yes. If you want my help, if you want me to save this company, it's on my terms. If you can't accept that, then I'll leave. But I won't come back again. Not for any of you. The room was silent, the tension thick enough to cut through. Finally, my father reached for a pen. His hand trembled slightly as he signed the first document, the one that would give me majority ownership. He didn't look at me as he signed, but I could feel the weight of his regret in the air. Mom followed, her hand shaking as she placed her signature on the paper. She didn't meet my eyes, and I didn't expect her to. But when Ryan stepped forward, I could see the hesitation in his eyes. He didn't want to give up control, didn't want to admit that he had failed. But in the end, he had no choice. With a sharp exhale, Ryan signed. It was done. I looked at the papers in front of me, feeling the weight of what I had just done. This wasn't just about taking control of a company. It was about taking control of my own life. No more playing by their rules. No more letting them decide what I was worth. Now, I said, standing up and gathering the papers. Let's get to work. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, decisions, and what felt like an endless stream of problems. The house had been quiet since I'd arrived, the tension thick in the air as we all adjusted to the new reality. But things were moving quickly, and I was determined to take charge. I had to. The first order of business was the company. I wasn't interested in wasting time with niceties or politeness. I had a plan, and I was going to execute it. I wasn't going to let Ryan's entitled attitude or my father's guilt slow me down. I set up a meeting with the remaining senior staff, those who hadn't been let go or pushed out by Ryan. It was time to rebuild the company from the inside, and I needed the right people by my side. The meeting room smelled faintly of old coffee and paper, a stark contrast to the sleek offices I had grown accustomed to in Chicago. I had worked my way up in a city that didn't know me, where no one cared about my last name. Now, here I was, back in the company my grandfather built, trying to salvage what was left. The room fell silent as I walked in. The faces of the few employees still left at the table looked uncertain. They didn't know what to expect, and to be honest, neither did I. But I couldn't let them see that. I had to be strong. I had to be the leader they needed me to be. We don't have much time. I started, looking each of them in the eye. The company is on the brink. Payments are overdue, contracts are falling apart, and we're hemorrhaging money. But that ends today. We're going to rebuild this, but it has to be with the right people. If you're not willing to get your hands dirty, now is the time to walk away. We need people who care about the work, not the perks. The silence stretched for a moment before Martin, the former head estimator who had stayed with the company, nodded. He was a solid guy, someone I knew I could count on. What do we need to do? He asked. We need to restructure, I said firmly. We'll start with the books. No more hiding behind the numbers. I need transparency on every contract, every expense. I'll be overseeing everything. I could see the tension in the room start to ease as they realized I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't just here to fix the numbers, I was here to fix everything. This wasn't just a company to me. It was my family's legacy, and I would fight to protect it. Ryan didn't make an appearance at the meeting. He didn't need to. He had already made his position clear. He wasn't interested in being involved in the day-to-day operations, just in keeping up appearances. But that was no longer enough. It never had been. The next few weeks were a blur. I spent days going through the financials, making phone calls to vendors, and meeting with contractors. I was back in my element, doing what I did best. It felt good, but the constant reminders of why I had left hung over me. I had to push them out of my mind. I couldn't afford to get distracted by the family drama. This was business. As the days passed, the company started to stabilize. Slowly, things began to fall into place. The first few checks cleared, and clients who had been on the verge of pulling out came back. We were turning things around, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. There was still too much damage to repair, and too many people who had been burned by Ryan's incompetence. I couldn't fix everything overnight, but I could do it my way. One evening, as I was wrapping up the day's work in my office, the door opened quietly. I didn't look up immediately. I knew who it was. I don't like this, Ryan said, his voice cold as usual. You're taking things too far. I finally looked up, meeting his eyes. I'm not here to make you happy, Ryan. I'm here to save the company. If you can't handle it, then maybe you should leave. He scoffed, his hands in his pockets. You can't just push me out like that. I'm still the face of this company. Not anymore. I replied, my voice unwavering. You don't get to play the part of the hero when you've been the one ruining everything. He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up my hand. I don't need to hear it. You're not in charge anymore. And if you think I'm going to let you continue to ruin everything my grandfather built, you're wrong. He didn't say anything after that. He just turned and walked out, his footsteps heavy with the weight of his defeat. That night, I sat back in my chair, staring at the numbers in front of me. It wasn't perfect. There were still issues to address, people to rehire, and clients to win back. But we were on the right path. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control again. The company was mine now, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially Ryan, take that away from me. The days that followed felt like an endless cycle of problem-solving and decision-making. I spent hours on the phone with contractors, suppliers, and clients. Everyone wanted something, and it seemed like the company's history of mismanagement had made each conversation 10 times more difficult. But somehow, despite all the chaos, I could feel us starting to turn the corner. Clients who had left began to return, hesitant at first, but slowly. They started to trust that things were changing. Still, there was a constant undercurrent of tension in the office. Ryan wasn't exactly making things easy. He'd been sidelined, but he wasn't gone. He still had influence. And he made it clear he wasn't going to let me take full control without a fight. It was a Thursday afternoon when I got the call. Martin, the head estimator, had been with the company for decades. He had been my father's right hand, and he was one of the few people left who truly understood how the company had run. His voice was strained when he spoke. "Cheryl," he said, "you need to hear this. It's bad. Ryan's been meeting with the board behind your back. He's telling them you don't know what you're doing. He's trying to rally support to get you out." I stood there, frozen. The betrayal cut deeper than I had expected. It wasn't enough for Ryan to take the company from me. Now, he was trying to take the only thing that mattered. The trust I had started to build with the people who could help me turn everything around. "I'm not surprised," I said, my voice low but steady. "It was always going to come to this. He can't handle not being in control." "I'm not saying it's too late," Martin continued, "but you need to act fast. The board's meeting tomorrow. They'll vote on this. You need to show them you're in charge. That you've got the power to pull this company out of the fire." The phone call ended with me staring at the wall, my heart pounding. The familiar feeling of being undermined and unseen returned. But this time, I wasn't backing down. I was in charge, and I wasn't about to let Ryan, or anyone else, take that away from me. I didn't waste time. I called an emergency meeting with the board, something I should have done weeks ago. I needed to show them that I wasn't just some replacement for Ryan. I was the one who could save this company. I was the one who could lead them out of the mess they'd let themselves get into. The meeting was set for the next morning, and I spent the rest of the night preparing. I went over the financials again, making sure I had every single number, every report at my fingertips. I had to be flawless. There could be no room for doubt. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom with a confidence I hadn't felt in years. The tension in the air was thick, but I didn't let it show. Ryan sat at the head of the table, his usual smug expression gone, replaced by something far more serious. He was looking for an opening, a way to take back control. But I wasn't going to give him one. "Good morning, everyone," I said. My voice firm and steady as I took my seat at the table. "I assume we're all here because of the state of the company. The same company that I've spent years working for. The same company my grandfather built with his own hands. And now, the same company I'm here to save." I glanced at Ryan, who was sitting with his arms crossed. "I'm not here to play nice. We're not here to coddle anyone's feelings. The company's been failing because we've ignored the issues for too long. It's time we face the truth and make the tough decisions." I could see the board members exchanging glances, some uncomfortable with the directness, others nodding in agreement. I continued, "I'm here to restructure the company. I'm here to put it back on the path to success. But I can't do that without full control. And I'm not asking for your approval, I'm demanding it." Ryan opened his mouth, but I cut him off before he could speak. "You've had your chance. And we've seen what happens when you're in charge. You've mismanaged, undermined, and taken advantage of everything that's been built. But now, it's my turn. And if any of you are willing to stand in the way of that, then you're part of the problem, too." The room was silent, but I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. I wasn't just talking about numbers and deals anymore. I was talking about the company's future. About my future. I was laying it all on the line, and I knew I couldn't back down now. Finally, one of the board members, a quiet woman I'd never met before, spoke up. "Cheryl, you've made your case. But we're not sure we can move forward without Ryan's input. He's been here since the beginning, and his connections are." I stood up, cutting her off. "We've given Ryan every chance to prove himself. It's time to stop pretending he's the future of this company. The future is here, and it's mine." Ryan's face turned red with anger. "You don't get to make this decision. You're out of options. I said, my voice calm but resolute. This isn't just about business anymore, Ryan. It's about saving the people who still believe in what this company can be. You've had your chance, and you've blown it. There was a long pause, and then one by one, the board members started nodding in agreement. The vote was swift, and before Ryan could protest, it was done. I had the control I needed. The company was mine. Ryan didn't say a word as he stormed out of the room. But I knew I had won. Not just the vote, but the respect of the people who mattered. The ones who would help me rebuild. I walked out of the boardroom, my head held high. The battle was far from over, but this was a victory. A victory I had earned, and it felt damn good. Now, it was time to finish what I started. The days after the board meeting felt surreal. The weight of everything I had fought for, everything I had rebuilt, settled on my shoulders like a mantle. The company was mine. But I knew the hardest part was just beginning. I wasn't just the new CEO. I was the one who had to save what was left of a legacy that had nearly crumbled under the pressure of years of mismanagement. The first few weeks were a blur of late nights and long phone calls. I was reviewing every contract, renegotiating deals, and re-establishing relationships with vendors and clients. It was a lot to handle on my own. But it was the only way to ensure we were on the right track. I couldn't afford to be complacent. Not after everything that had happened. Slowly, things began to change. The staff started to trust me. The people who had stuck around through the chaos began to see that I wasn't like Ryan. I didn't care about titles or prestige. I cared about the work, about the people who made the company what it was. They were the ones who deserved recognition. They were the ones who would help us rebuild. It wasn't easy. Ryan, still bitter and resentful, tried to disrupt things at every turn. But I wasn't going to let him have that power anymore. I had the control now, and I wasn't going to let him or anyone else take it from me. One afternoon, I was sitting at my desk, reviewing some final paperwork, when I got a call from my mother. It had been weeks since we last spoke, and her voice was strained when she spoke. "Cheryl," she said softly, "I just wanted to thank you. For everything. Your father. He's proud of you. He hasn't said it, but I know." I sat back in my chair, the weight of her words sinking in. For so long, I had fought for my father's approval, for the recognition I deserved. But now, I realized something. I didn't need it. I had made my own way. I had built my own success, and that was worth more than any acknowledgement he could give me. "Mom, you don't have to thank me," I said, my voice firm but gentle. "I did what needed to be done. I'm not doing this for Dad. I'm doing it for the company. For the people who depend on it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I know, sweetheart. I know. And I'm proud of you, too. More than you'll ever know." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting her words settle in. I had spent so many years feeling invisible, feeling like I didn't matter. But now, I had a family of my own. The employees who had stuck by me, the clients who trusted me, and even the new partners I was bringing on. It wasn't the family I had expected, but it was the one I had built. Over the next few months, things began to fall into place. The company was stabilizing. Clients were returning, and the staff was beginning to rebuild the culture I had always hoped for. We were no longer a family business in name only. We were a business that was focused on the future, on growth, and on doing things the right way. I had learned so much about myself through this journey. I had learned how to take control when others had tried to take it from me. I had learned how to lead, not with fear or authority, but with integrity and respect. I had learned that my worth wasn't tied to anyone else's approval. It was tied to the work I did and the impact I made. One evening as I sat in my office, looking out over the city, I received a message from my father. It was short, simple, and to the point. "Cheryl," it read, "you did it. You saved the company. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I stared at the message for a long time. There were no grand apologies, no emotional speeches. But in that moment, I knew that was all I would ever get from him. And that was enough. I didn't respond immediately. I just sat there, taking it all in. The past was behind me now. The company was mine, and I had the power to shape its future. But more than that, I had taken control of my own life. I wasn't just the daughter of a man who had always expected too much. I was a leader in my own right, and I had done it my way. As the months passed, the company continued to grow. We had new clients, new projects, and a renewed sense of purpose. I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what we had accomplished. We had rebuilt from the ground up, and I had played a part in every step of that journey. But even more than the business successes, what I took away from this journey was the realization that I had finally found my place. Not just in the company, but in my own life. I had learned to embrace who I was, flaws and all. And that was the greatest victory of all. As I looked out over the city one final time, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had fought for what was mine, and I had won. And now, it was time to move forward on my own terms. The company was thriving, I was thriving, and that was all that mattered.